Hello and welcome to This Week in Cannabis Live, our weekly show that we do in concert with our friends at High Spirit. That's Ben Larson, High Spirits, and Mark Hauser. Mark Hauser from Cannabis Musings, and Jeremy from Cultivated. It's harder than it looks because you're looking at yourself. You know, it's all. I guess it's spatial relations. We do the show every Friday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. We run down the big stories of the week. We talk to these incredibly smart people all around me. We get some interesting takes, and then we get you on your day. Team, everybody this week either wrote something or said something about hemp, and that includes almost everybody in Washington, D.C. Mark, I want to go to you first because I think a couple weeks ago you were downplaying that hemp could hold up the government reopening, and it turns out it didn't, but it was a big deal, it seemed like, in Washington, at least for Rand Paul. Are you surprised that it actually even made sort of national headlines that this was an issue for Rand Paul?
Yeah, it is kind of remarkable that it made national headlines, but I guess maybe it's not that surprising because, I guess it had the potential, and it's a big deal because it is out there in a lot of states.
Dog.
Sorry, my dog's not happy about the hemp ban.
He likes Rand Paul, doesn't like the vote.
Yeah, no, but it's not surprising because it's kind of a remarkable thing to happen, whether you agree with it or not. And the fact that it might have held up, I didn't think it was going to hold it up because I just don't think it's that important to Congress, was my point, as important as it is to the industry.
I have an interesting observation out of all of this is that it was literally holding it up. Yeah. But when I talk to people that aren't in the industry, they still have no idea. Like it was in the headlines, and like everyone's like, "Oh, how's business?" I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "You have no idea what's going on?" And it's so curious as to like what's happening with how people are receiving their news, the echo chambers that they create, and like how tailored our algorithms are to what we see, because it is huge. And I felt like, I'm like, oh, look, good or bad, cannabinoids are finally on the main stage. Like, this is big news. And guess it wasn't for everyone else.
Right. So yeah. Ben, I have a little anecdote on that front. My own brother, who lives 10 blocks from me and is one of my closest friends, right? My best friend. Regular cannabis consumer, and he asked me, what is going on with hemp, right? So I said, first of all, you're not reading the newsletter, obviously, so I took a little bit of offense to that. Second of all, I think it was emblematic of the fact that even people who read the news, who are smart, who consume cannabis, have no idea what was going on. I had to explain the whole THCA thing, the whole hemp thing, and so I think that's not to say my brother's dumb. I'd love to call him dumb, but I'm just saying that if he didn't understand what was going on here, then the way all these nuances that we talk about every single day permeate the mainstream, it was sort of this mask off moment. Like, whoa, people really, really don't understand what is going on here, what is happening. And if my own brother doesn't understand, how could you expect, a geriatric senator to understand and make effective policy?
A geriatric senator. Yeah, there's 100 of those.
Yeah.
Well, more or less.
Couple hundred.
But actually, this brings up the question that even the hemp ban, if we call it that, in the bill that reopened government, in the continuing resolution, still counts down 365 days, I guess, from yesterday, because that's when the bill was signed. There were a lot of takes on social media about these 365 days ahead. One was, we have 365 days to run out the clock. One was we have 365 days to get something passed in Congress that does this, has this ban go away. They were sort of hardline, I would say, cannabis people, cheering the ban. It was kind of all over the map. And I put to Jeremy in our Slack channel where we talk shit, that if I was a non-risk averse hemp-derived THC brand, I would be investing heavily in getting my brand out there in the next 365 days, because I don't believe this ban is going to go into effect, because we see that things that say it's going to be 365 days in Congress end up being 4, 5, and 10 years, right? Pushed off. So, yes, Mark.
Well, I don't know that that's the same because it's an actual deadline that's in
Sure.
law. It's different than the farm bill just being continued. So I don't know that I don't know that that's quite the same.
But just as easily, you could say the hemp ban that we passed in continuing resolution is actually, we're going to make it a 3-year extension rather than a 1-year extension.
Well, but that would take an affirmative.
Sure,
that
but
would
it could
take
be
an
tacked onto
affirmative,
the next
yeah.
omnibus bill or what, I know that.
Yes. No, but that again, that would take an affirmative action versus
Sure.
the farm bill just continue because nobody did anything.
Right.
So I just want to clarify that.
Sure.
But yeah.
Sure. But if I was Rand Paul looking at this and I was a member of Congress, I would say undo that and let's make it part of the farm bill reauthorization, which is being kicked down the road. Like, let's do those things in concert because they actually are related. That would be how I would go at it if I was a hemp person lobbying Congress. And I think the CEO of CAN, Jeremy, you're going to correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, he was like, this is the most important 364 days in the of our industry, and here's what we're going to do about it. Ben, you talked to a lot of these people, obviously. Like, is it dire? Is it a call to action? Is it a rejiggering of business? Like, what is it? And are people taking action right now?
Great questions. There has been a lot of noise on LinkedIn over the past week, and I find for me it's been probably my quietest week because I've just been taking it all in.
Yeah. Thoughtful.
Look, I've been in this industry for 10 years now. This isn't my first existential threat. So,
right.
No, I'm not going to fucking react to this. Sorry. You can bleep that out.
No, we can't.
Anyways. No, we can't. It's live. No, but look, I've been telling people in hemp for the last, at least 3 years since I've been really looking at the industry seriously, was like, if you're expecting this to go up and to the right forever, like, you're sorely mistaken. And eventually people are going to realize that we're talking about cannabis, right? And so that brings me back to my philosophy on cannabis in general. Like, we don't have a viable industry yet. And it just seems like for the last 10 years that I've been doing this, it's just one giant petri dish for the powers that be to really understand where the opportunity and the demand is. And there is a significant category that actually understands it now, and that's beverage. Yeah. It's like, oh, interesting. And the weird thing that's been happening over the last 2 years is that the power dynamic in how these products are built and sold has threatened the typical power dynamic that exists in alcohol, right? So you have the 3-tier system, you have the suppliers, the distributors, the retailers. It's a very well-organized system that many people hate, but it exists, and there's a lot of money into it. Like, I tell people all the time, it's like there's many singular companies that could come in and buy the entire category, like literally today. And so it's like, if you think you're significant, like, you're, again, sorely mistaken. And so what's happening? And I think people are taking this time, and people, meaning not us, not the ones pontificating on LinkedIn, the ones that actually have the money to affect change, are looking at the supply chain. They're going to be like, how do we own the stills, so to speak? How do we own the farms? And then they're going to look at the distributions. Like, you folks get to play your role that you've always played. And they're going to select the distributors, and then the retailers are going to do their thing. And I mean, it's all written. And if you think hemp can get big enough, I think this was a big signal to the hemp industry, right? Was like, yeah, you think you're big and powerful and you think you have a lot of lobbying dollars, but look how quickly we can change that on you. Yeah. And it's a big flex. And so this is capitalism at work. And I think we can try to determine, like, our moves and all this kind of stuff, but really it's just like, how do you listen to what everyone wants? And that's the regulators, the policymakers, and the people with the money. And how do you give them what you want while actually cutting out a little bit for yourself?
That's fair.
That's a great point, Ben. And I think that, and I think it does really show the dynamic of the distributors and retailers of alcohol versus the producers. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the distributors have been angling at, trying to get cannabis generally into the 3-tier system, post legalization. They've been lobbying that for a couple of years now. And, but this is certainly the drinks would be a way to do that, because they're the ones that benefit from the 3-tier system and nobody else does. I'm sorry, safety, but
oh yeah, the kids.
Safety. But I think that I would also add to that I think hemp has sort of come to realize, or has come to really sort of discover, that it's cannabis. And as much as it wants to pretend that it's not, it's cannabis. And cannabis policy is different. And cannabis policy is very hard to convince Congress of otherwise. And, and so the challenge of building an industry based upon, an inadvertent legalization of the product is really hard when you haven't really convinced Congress of that. And so, right, the rest of cannabis still lives in this same sort of tentative, by the grace of the federal government, it's not shut down. And, and I think hemp always had that problem. And so if it can turn that around and convince Congress to allow something, then at least it can restart from a solid base to build on, rather than that sort of, again, having this sort of Damocles over its head the whole time.
Yeah.
So I think it's a combination of both.
I think one of the interesting things, and Ben and Jeremy mentioned what you think, and Jeremy, your brother too. When I told my wife that, I said, do you remember when we were in Nashville and we had those THC beverages and a bunch of the sort of trucks rolling around were, branded from Cantrip and others, like that appears to be going away in a year. And her reaction was, that sucks. Like, I think it definitely, if it hasn't made it to even people who pay quasi attention, like what happens when these things start coming off the shelves in places where they're on the shelves? Or does that even happen? That it's like, it doesn't even happen.
If it does happen, it's momentary. Like this, we have proven that the consumer wants this,
right,
and the consumer is working away from alcohol. Again, like there's a gravitational pull that will make this happen. And so, yeah, the flip side of the coin, I know I was talking about hemp earlier, but like the regulated cannabis folks that are celebrating, again, if like it's just, if you don't realize that what has happened with THC beverages as not the best thing to ever happen to the cannabis industry as far as normalization and the progression of relevance, like, again, you're just like so far off the plot. Like, and if you don't think that this is someday going to be federally legalized and these greater powers that are pulling this into the mainstream, and it is a pull, it's not a push. Like, it might feel like it conveniently at the time because it's, again, convenient for the lobbying efforts. Like, oh yeah, the regulated cannabis folks are going to help us shut us down, and like they'll be the scapegoat, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, great. But like the minute they have the opportunity to capture this and snuff you out, it is absolutely going to happen. So stop celebrating and get on board with progressing the industry forward altogether, right?
Yeah.
Can I add something else to this? Is that I'm not as if the hemp industry is not able to turn this around and get the law changed, within the year by November of 26, I do think it's off the shelves, because at that point it becomes a controlled substance again, and the alcohol distributors and the retailers and the convenience stores are not going to touch it. And to me, that is, you may see it again go sort of underground, and maybe you'll have within a state, you might have folks willing to sort of distribute, but the folks that are licensed by the federal government to alcohol are not going to touch it. So I
just think it's just so interesting that we've taken an industry where we've had these arbitrary metrics that have defined illegal versus legal, and we've inserted a new one, and that's the 0.4 milligrams of THC. So yes, you have a controlled substance, but if it's 0.4 milligrams or less, it's not a controlled substance. And so what that does for me is just adds that many more levers to create bounds of a legal framework in the future. And so, if they said they could have gone with just detectable THC and completely eliminated it, but they didn't. And that would, frankly, from a policy perspective, that would just been a lot cleaner. It's THC is illegal, duh. But like now that there's this a second metric by which to measure legal versus not, I don't see. I only see it as a foundation to kind of work the numbers to create the carve outs that the big industry wants to see.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just quickly on that point. I mean, I was speaking to someone the other day who basically said exactly what you were saying, Ben. It's how hard is it to go? It's a lot less hard, not how hard is it. It's a lot less hard to go from 0.4 to say 3.5 or 5 than it is to actually get THC on the right side of the legal ledger. And so it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think Mark, to your point with consumer adoption, clearly there is a huge market for these products. Clearly businesses are being built. It's brought energy and investment dollars back to cannabis, however broadly defined. And so it will be interesting to see if they can get a low dose carve out for beverages or something of that like in the next 363 days. I do think the last point on that is look, Texas is a red state, and it is generating its own rules for THC drinks. And so will the federal government really go in and supersede Texas? Probably not. There's a huge regulatory question about this that I'm not sure where that falls.
Yeah. Oh, no, I mean, I think it's actually pretty clear that the federal law preempts the state law. And the problem is you can't cross state lines with it once it's a controlled substance again. I would, so if the federal government says it's a controlled substance, now, I mean, that gets a little bit to the argument in the Canna provisions case, the Boy Schiller case that's being brought, that, that's arguing that the Controlled Substances Act shouldn't apply to intra-state, cannabis. But, I mean, so far that the courts have sort of shot that down, and the Supreme Court is sort of its last legs. Yeah. But again, I think it's a matter of, you could see markets within a state that, but again, I think it will still be, you'll have sort of hemp distributors. It's not going to be carried by Southern Glazer and, RNC and the like. Yeah.
I guess my point was, I mean, and I'm obviously not an attorney here, so
I'm not trying to attorney-splain to you.
No. The point was, the point being is that if federal law should it not preempt any sort of state-regulated cannabis industry at this moment, right? In California and New York. So what is Texas really doing that's different than what California is doing by regulating THC?
Yes. No, that's right. I mean, but it just then puts hemp in the same exact place as the rest of regulated cannabis. Right. And then, in certain states where you have a developed licensed cannabis, industry, will it make sense then to have hemp outside of that within your state? And so like that create, in markets like Texas where there isn't much of a regulated system, it makes more sense. But I don't know. It's very interesting.
Here's the thing. It's just like the beverage category does not work in these state verticalized systems. They don't have the economies of scale to support the program, nor do the retailers really attract the right consumer. And so what will likely happen at some point is that there will be a pathway made for beverage, be it hemp or cannabis, and it'll drive, decision making as far as the supply chain necessary to support it. I do want to touch really quick because everyone always brings up like the farmers or the viability of the market if you don't have all these different things. And I just want to point out that I think we have like 20,000, maybe 30,000 acres of hemp being grown in the US right now, supporting this entire ecosystem. You could argue like how much cannabis is actually also being funneled into there. So I'll call it 50,000. Right. But like when you're talking about agriculture in the US, like, do you know how much like corn and alfalfa is grown? Like we're talking like
zeros. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 100 million acres plus of these two different crops that generally generate about $800 to $900 an acre per year. And like right now a hemp acre is generating somewhere between $10,000 and $30,000 an acre, and so it's like there's a lot of room to expand the supply chain and like just drive this and still sit within these like very limiting bands of what the current laws are kind of giving it, the 0.3%. So it's like anyone that's like focusing on the farmers or like the viability of the supply chain, like economics will find its way. Again, this comes to the power dynamic, and like if everyone's thinking it's like, oh, this is going to push consumers into the regulated supply chain, like it's not going to work. Like there'll be this moment, it's like, oh, your sales bumped by 1 or 2%. Congratulations. Right. People are still not getting the products that they want where they want them.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you want to expand your farm, I hear Rand Paul is taking applications in Kentucky. He would like your farm to be placed.
I'm sure there's a bunch of bourbon owners that will fund it too.
Sure, so absolutely. I want to shift gears a little bit. Jeremy, you wrote a little bit about this. I like when governors go after each other a little bit.
Yeah.
The governor of Florida wrote something. You're going to tell us exactly what about cannabis tax collection and the market in Colorado. The Colorado governor, Jared Polis, had something to say about that. I'll put up Jared Polis's tweet as you tell us what is going on between these two. I would say, obviously, well-known, but also important governors.
Yeah, so throw out Polis's tweet so I can, sure. speak with some sort of level of intelligence here. I think it's no stranger to anyone watching this program that Ron DeSantis is one of the most public big state governors to go against cannabis. He potentially may have illicitly spent taxpayer funds to fight Amendment 3, which was a ballot measure that would have legalized cannabis in the state last year. I think what struck me about this exchange is the tendency for people to think about the issue of cannabis legalization or cannabis prohibition in absolutes, right? I mean, that's no stranger to any sort of hot button topic that we discuss as a society. But Ron DeSantis, I wrote a tongue-in-cheek newsletter about it this week because I feel like he is smart enough to understand that what he is saying is so stupid, right? Unless Harvard needs to give their freshman remedial econ education, it's certainly not how I learned econ in college and grad school, and I'm sure it's not how Ron did as well. But basically, he's saying that Colorado, basically the thrust of his argument is that with any taxes at all, it puts consumers back into the illicit market, which completely ignores the basic tenets of econ, like demand elasticity and setting tax policy in ways that we can model this, right? Like we actually have a decade to look from about how to set tax rates effectively that incentivize legal market participation and disincentivize illicit market participation. And while obviously, these are probabilities, they're curves, we have enough data to get this stuff right. And either Ron DeSantis doesn't understand how that works, or he's being deliberately misleading because he has a more religious or dogmatic opposition to cannabis legalization. And so I thought that what Jared Polis said was pretty interesting on that front, saying, look, actually, we have raised tax revenue. We're not getting it perfect. States are a laboratory of democracy. We can experiment and try new things. And that's all we're asking, I think, of state governors and policymakers is that, look, like, let's do these experiments. Let's use evidence and data to figure out what works. Let's not be dogmatic in our opposition or even our, preference for legalization, right? I think that falls on either side.
But you do you. That's how he ended his tweet. I like that.
But you do you. Yeah, I think if Ron DeSantis or anyone in his office is listening, don't do you and actually do
do Jared Polis. I like that better. It's funny. It's funny. It's interesting because obviously we saw what happened in Florida and the two governors going at it. I think that's good fun. I mean, I don't like that Ron DeSantis still has sort of this burr in his saddle. I know that that's a saying. Probably more of a Colorado saying than a Florida saying, but a burn his saddle about cannabis legalization. And that wasn't the argument he was saying actually during the campaign. So it's interesting to see sort of Florida still. I don't like that he's still sort of got his fists up against legalization because I think that battle is going to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It absolutely will. And look, like, I mean, I think we should underscore the fact that the vast majority of Floridians did want legalization despite the governor's well-oiled opposition. I think the vote was nearly 57%, but because of Florida's ballot rules that had to exceed 60%. And look, like getting 60% on any issue is very, very difficult, even one as popular as cannabis.
Yeah.
Particularly in a presidential election year too.
Well,
Right.
Well,
Right.
also, let me just throw this back to the first part of the conversation. Hemp was a big part of that conversation too. The no on the measure was largely funded, from what I remember from what Jeremy
Yes.
wrote, by the hemp industry. There was a deal cut to actually oppose it.
Yep.
The ban on hemp derived THC products in Congress is actually an extension of, I think, well, it's actually the flip side of it of what was happening in Florida. Like the topsy-turvy nature of this is very unsettled. I guess we'll see how that plays out again in Florida in the coming year. But I don't love, and Ben, I think this is your point. I don't love when one part of the THC and one cannabinoid is arguing with the other sort of form of the cannabinoid, because I think that sort of defeats the purpose of the broad appeal of consumers want THC.
Yeah. I mean, look, the hemp industry has been very effective at killing bills for the last few years,
Yeah.
right? And that has allowed this industry to proliferate, evolve, innovate, whatever you want to call it. But we are in the phase where everybody knows what's going on. Almost everybody, everyone that makes decisions in this case, it's like it's all weed, right? It's one plant. Like I'll say that in a non-controversial way right now. Like it's the same thing, and so let's start building legislation that actually makes sense and that gives people what we know that they want, right? And so the powers that be now know what's going on. Like we need to get them involved. The regulators know what's going on. Like stop trying to pull the wool over their eyes. Like stop hiding behind things, and let's build legislation. I would love to see U.S. Hemp Roundtable come in with actual like responsible legislation that shows that they've been listening to what the regulators and policymakers have been saying, and like be willing to meet in the middle. I think like there's been a lot of finger pointing on LinkedIn. They've blamed the lack of unity. They blame the Bev Bros like for ruining it for everyone, for not aligning behind hemp farmers and shit like that. It's like it failed because there wasn't responsible legislation proposed, and it failed because people were not willing to take any sort of restrictions, right? It failed for a whole number of reasons, but like the main reason is that everyone knows what's going on. We just need something that's responsible, and we need everyone to get behind it.
Yeah. I want to segue a bit, and I don't even think it's a big segue, because we've been talking about so far in this conversation of 27 minutes and 45 seconds about what's happening in the US on the hemp side, on the cannabis side, and part of that is about building brand and how we do that. Jeremy and I had on a Canadian company CEO who actually said something interesting about building brands globally. And frankly, earlier in the conversation about avoiding the U.S. because of the regulatory landmines or uncertainty, I want to play what Mark Gorenstein, who's the CEO of the Kronos Group, a longtime cannabis company here in Canada, but now sort of going worldwide to Israel and other places. I just want to share what he said about building brand and using Canada as a base, because I think it actually is interesting in some of the opportunities that the U.S. and U.S.-based companies are missing out on.
We think of it like our strategy is borderless products. And the idea has always been that you use Canada as a base to develop the products, refine your offering, and learn how to operate, because it was the first market. And then you take that, and as other markets open, you spread to those markets. Your investment is going to kind of be similar anywhere to develop the products, to build out the initial brand portfolio. And then it's really about how you're going to market when somewhere opens. So the success we have in Israel, we wouldn't have that success if we hadn't made the investments in Canada. And same thing with Germany or the UK and any other markets that open. It's like a proxy. Instead of waiting for the US to be legal to start developing everything, you get a 10-year head start. You can develop all your products, and then you're ready to go and be competitive. Because to me, what makes you win in a market is having the best products.
I quite like Mike. He's actually been one of the CEOs that last. Hold on. Sorry. He's been one of the people that actually has been around for the entire industry, pre-launch and now. And they actually do have good standing in sort of brands in Canada, but are actually using that to expand to other places, Israel, the UK, and Germany. I just thought it was an interesting parallel conversation that is happening outside of the US about building international cannabis brands and actually using Canada as a base. Jar, I know we both like Mike.
Yeah.
It was. I thought it was a really good conversation. I called it the Mike Goranson MBA interview.
Yeah, no, I'm always a fan of Mike G's as well. I mean, he's sort of one of the OGs of the Canadian cannabis industry, and the fact that he is still around, Kronos Group is still around since 2018. I think Jay, you brought up the funny point where both you and I were in those heady days in 2017, 2018, 2019 Toronto, and Mike was on a lot of panels with a lot of CEOs who may have made money but did not build any sort of lasting brand or lasting impact in the cannabis industry. And so, look, I think, it's always interesting to hear from Mike. And it takes a lot of gumption. I know that's kind of a terrible word, but to avoid the shiny object of getting into the US, right? I think shareholders probably killed him for that 4, 5, 6 years ago. And right now, Kronos Group is actually doing pretty well. And so I think even within Cultivated, there's a lot of shiny objects that we can chase. So I think when you're a public company, there's a hell of a lot more. And so I do admire that.
And actually, I want to end with this, and then we'll talk about what we're all going to be doing over the next couple of weeks in Las Vegas and other places. Ben and Mark, I'm not even going to name the company, but the week before the hemp ban was voted on in Congress, we got a press release from a multi-state operator that they were moving into the hemp-derived beverage space. Anybody can look. It was in our newsletter. Really, I don't know, bad timing, obviously. But we will see fewer of those, I would imagine. But what do the MSOs do that have invested in this and building brand and footprint around the country?
Well, I wrote about. I think the biggest question is what happens with Rhythm, and GTI is the former sort of play with the Agrify. To me, that was the biggest. It may not have been the biggest. It might have actually been the biggest investment dollar wise, but it also was a very sort of big structured play to build a platform of a hemp business out of a public vehicle. And now they have the ability to actually pull it back. It'll be interesting to see. But you had Trulieve open the was it Trulieve? I think that opened the store in Trulieve in Florida. But there, at least they could use a licensed dispensary. Yeah, I think the ones that where it's going to be harder are the small companies that need to raise more money. Because investors are going to be a lot more unwilling to put money into the industry until there's more clarity. So I don't know.
Yeah, time will tell. But what I can tell you in the next 6 months, give or take, is that there will be the bigger brands that have invested in it and are going to continue to push. I can't say who, but we've talked to a lot of people in the industry, and it seems like there's a lot of resolve and doubling down and even accelerating in strategies with the hope. I don't know if hope's the right word. I don't like that word, but basically the hope that there is progress on the policy front while, assessing through that time period about whether it's actually good to keep doing that or if they're going to use the last 6 months to kind of start winding things down. There's a bunch of externalities that could happen along the way. Payment processing is like an interesting externality, like what happens at the state level, Texas, Tennessee, all that kind of stuff. It's like Minnesota, right? Yeah. So it's like, but when it comes to these brands, they will be the ones that at least have some staying power to withstand like that it's like playing poker, right? It's like, oh yeah, I'll see the flop. So they're all going to stick with it. But, to Mark's point, these smaller brands, like the long tail is going to be lopped off, unfortunately, because there's going to be zero venture capital that's willing to do anything here until there's certainty.
Yeah. Ben, that was a great lead in to one of the things I want to talk about as we close the show. This group plus Anna Ray, will be together in Las Vegas.
Woohoo!
I don't know what to call it. Maybe this today in Cannabis Live. We'll do from Las Vegas, from our suite adjacent to the convention center on Wednesday and Friday mornings. So we will look for an announcement on that. If you're watching this, you are hearing the news first, but we'll be be sharing the details of where to find us during those days. Also, this is completely self-interested. Cultivated will be releasing our 30/30 list next Friday. So we'll talk about it on the show, but we'll also through socials. Please follow us. We deliver one every morning at 8:01 Eastern time. And you can find Ben, High Spirits podcast on YouTube and on LinkedIn. Get Mark's newsletter inbox, Cannabis Musings. It's great. I read it. I'm smarter for it. And I quote it and sometimes even give him credit for when I actually quote it. We also carry it. So Ben, Mark, Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us here today. And we will be back next Friday, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. Everybody ready to roll for the weekend?
Let's go.
Let's do it.
And the peyote did not kick in during the show, which is good news. Just kidding. Just kidding, everybody. Yeah. All right. We'll see everybody next week.
Thanks, Jordan.